Hello and welcome to Tigers by the Fire, a podcast out of Holy Cross High School about World War II discussions and stories. This is Season 5 and a special episode coming from Krakow, Poland. Over the past week, 20 students from Holy Cross High School have been visiting Germany, Poland, and tomorrow, the Czech Republic. Today, we took a trip to Auschwitz Birkenau concentration camp. This episode will highlight that trip and talk to a few of the students and get their reactions of what they saw. This was an extremely emotional and heavy journey for our group. We had 35 people there, and we went through, at first, Auschwitz concentration camp, and then we took a bus ride over to Birkenau and got to hear stories from a tour guide. It was incredibly impactful, and so these are the stories from the kids. So I am here with Miguel. He's going to share some thoughts about his visit today to Auschwitz Birkenau concentration camp on a school trip to Central Europe.
Thank you. One of my thoughts that I want to share is that the sheer magnitude about those millions and millions of Jews dying is more than just a statistic to me. It's like each one of them had their own personal life, own birthday, own birth certificate. Each one of them had like their own emotion, and like especially with like the babies and stuff, the kids, they didn't even stand a chance when they went to the death camp. Most of them were instantly sent off to just die. They didn't have a single chance of, like, even so, like the pregnant mothers and stuff like that as well, those were also killed. And it's just each one of them had their own like just set personality. Every single one of them was an individual person that just end up dying and some of them being forgotten in history, which is, sort of sad to me. But
so Miguel, when you were visiting, I know you talked a lot about like the personal connections. What part of visiting Auschwitz did you find gave you that kind of personal connection to it and impacted you?
The personal thing would probably be when we walked in and the speaker was like saying names and whatnot of individual people that lost their lives in the camp. And when we went in and saw like the thousands of shoes and the thousands of baby shoes that were in there, that kind of like hit me deep a little bit.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, seeing items, possessions, it made it a little bit more real. And it's one of those things. Like you read about it, like we said before, you read about it, you hear about it, but once you actually see it, you start to get the magnitude of it. When we were going through it, and they kind of jam you in. There's a lot of people. Did you feel, I guess, like the weight of the place, the event, as you went through it?
I would say yes. It was a little crowded, but I would say I think about like it was even more crowded for the Jews that was in there. Like I was shoulder bumping some people, but some people couldn't even walk to place because it was so jam packed in there. So that's what really messed me up.
All right. I think now I have Michael here. Michael is going to share some thoughts about his experience there as well. All right, Michael.
Thank you, Coach. I want to add right on top of what Miguel just said with the bumping. As soon as you walk into the outer wall and like you walk onto the property, you feel the weight of the place. There's nothing that can describe it. Additionally, like with the space and how cold it is, all of that just goes completely out of your mind. You don't think about how cold it is. You don't care how cold it is. You're blown away by the weight and the emotion of being in a place where so many lost their lives and so many suffered.
I know you talk about like the magnitude of it and everything else. What struck you about the size and just complexity of the whole place? Because I know we saw two different sites. We saw Auschwitz and we saw Birkenau. If you don't know, if you're listening to this, there's multiple camps for Auschwitz Birkenau, but Birkenau is the death camp. Auschwitz is more of a labor prisoner camp, but still with death and the rain, most of the people who went there died. So what did you notice about just the size of everything, Michael?
The size of the camp, especially Birkenau, was tremendous. I don't think I've ever seen a property that big or anything to that magnitude. With the statistic that was given in Birkenau was 70% of those living there would die before they would be freed or leave. And Auschwitz was 50%. The size of Auschwitz was, while large, very small in comparison to Birkenau. Birkenau was, as soon as you walk up, you see the huge size. You can't comprehend it. I think you could walk that for a year and still never see every single detail and every single preserved part of that camp.
And any of you, I have a few guys in here, so anybody can answer this one if you want. What was it like? You guys have all seen that famous gate. You've seen, well, both gates that we saw, the one at Auschwitz that has the lettering on there, and then, of course, the one with the train tracks leading into Birkenau. What was it like going through that and being there in person? All right, Mr. Guichard.
I remember this vividly. I remember walking up and I was expecting to see the sign just eventually. And then when I saw it, I was it was like a wave of just awe. It was just like the amount of people who walked through this gate and thought that work will set you free. That how if I just work and obey, I'll eventually be out of here. I won't be here long. And that'd be the last thing they'd ever see. It's so heart crushing. And also the one at Birkenau is just, you see it in photos all the time, but seeing it in person is just a different feeling that, you can't really describe or feel anywhere else. When walking through the gate on your way in, you immediately feel sadness, and you just, there's no way to describe the pain that is felt through the stories you've heard and then just the sheer magnitude of the site. But on the way out, I know I felt a little bit of anger when I was walking back out. The tour guide had mentioned how important members of the Nazi Party, Dr. Mendeleev, who experimented on children especially, had escaped to countries in South America, and it made me feel very uneasy that leaders and people could have let such a terrible person escape justice and to continue living their lives in a different country, especially those in South America where U.S. forces could have either bombed or destroyed the entire country if they really wanted to bring that person to justice.
Yeah, and I think, you guys got to hear two different people like that, right? So you have Hess, who's in charge of the whole camp, and he's brought to justice because he's the guy in charge of the camp. But Mangala, who does horrible things to just people, kids, he dies of like I said, a heart attack on a stroke on vacation, right?
He wound up drowning.
Yeah, he drowned. It was in Brazil, I think. He drowns. So it's just crazy to think that people who facilitated this were able to get away. Caden, you had some stuff to add.
I think one thing that was very interesting was Birkenau, because for me, it was just walking and then you just lift your head up and you see just this historic gate, and it's just kind of like it's an eyesore almost. Like you have like the forest next to it, and then just this big brick building, and it's just a fence with train tracks leading into it. It's like it's a lot different than a textbook, because the textbook you turn a page and you see the image, but it's different when you like look up and it's there, and it just does not fit in. It's such like a symbol of death, and how many people again saw that, and that was one of the last things they ever saw. Was they saw that, and then they'd get off the train, and like especially women and children, that would be the last kind of thing they would see, and then you'd go off your train into like the forest or one of the other ones in the back of the camp, and you'd be dead within a few hours, especially in the summer.
Yeah.
Where they, as the tour guide said, you'd have people dying the same day they arrived, and that was just kind of the last thing, was this giant like eyesore of a giant fence with the train track in the middle that just would lead to a lot of deaths.
Additionally, like when you see pictures of the gate leading into Birkenau, you kind of imagine that a wall must surround the entire camp. It's not as much of a wall as you might think. It's more of a cattle pasture, as in like it's an electrified barbed wire fence that surrounds the entire camp. And I kind of knew that it was an electrified barbed wire fence, but I still thought that there would be some sort of a hard, like you couldn't see through type fence, like an actual fence or a wall, as opposed to just barbed wire with electricity running through it. It shows how they were really kept in there by a ton of fear, people that were not afraid to just shoot anybody, women, children, men, didn't matter to them. They truly believed that they were a subhuman race and were just there to be executed.
So one of the things we went into, and I know it was kind of said, we walked down into one of the first gas chambers that was used at Auschwitz, where they said about 100,000 people died. Obviously a very kind of like surreal experience. What did you guys take away from that? Just walking down the same steps that people walk through and going down into that area.
Just as before as you were walking up, I knew that we were eventually going to walk through it, but I was kind of just dreading it. It's just so hard to think about, like just walking through these steps. It's like you just thinking about how these steps are the final steps of 100,000 people, and it's like it's so hard, just to think about in your mind how like these people were people just like you and me, how these people could have been, just like doctors, lawyers, and it's just how they walk in and nobody would walk out. It's just really crazy.
It is definitely a very surreal feeling walking through those doors into the chamber. You can see marks on the wall from where people like were desperately trying to get out. I know I probably took 40 pictures in there just because it's something that once you see it, you want to remember it, but you never want to see it again. And earlier in the tour, you saw a model of what the 4 massive gas chamber and crematorials were like in Birkenau, and then you walked through the smallest and first gas chamber that was at Auschwitz, and it's placed at the end of the tour, I think, for a reason, to really make you walk through the life of these people on a day-to-day basis, and then see where many of them ended up towards the end. And it makes it so much heavier seeing how the smallest gas chamber could deal 100,000 deaths, and then you look at the 4 massive, they were huge, and how much death they could deal in such a short period of time. Nothing will ever compare to those mass murder sites.
I think one thing that definitely got me was they told us we were going into the first gas chamber, and I knew it, and yet still turning that corner, it took me 2 or 3 minutes to realize, oh, this is what this is. Like it didn't register in my mind until someone said, and then this is where they dropped Cyclone B. It's like, oh, I knew I was walking into it, and I still didn't realize you were in a gas chamber. It was only until someone pointed out to me, and to think that these people who were in these chambers, they had no clue, especially for this first one. They thought they were going to take a normal shower and then go somewhere else, and you just walk in and it's over. It's very surreal because I personally knew what was happening, and I still couldn't realize that was a gas chamber. It still took me a few minutes, and even someone pointing it out to me, to realize, oh, this is where it happened. This is how it happened. And then you go to the next room, it's immediately the incineration. It's so just one door over. It just kind of something that's very interesting, as like kind of how they managed to kind of convince all these people that not only were they going, that they weren't going somewhere bad, that they were actually doing something good by going into these chambers. And I think that's kind of something that was very interesting to see in person, and not just reading a textbook or watch a video about.
I'm not sure, in that same building, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, I'm sure you did, we walked into the next room, and they had the crematorium, right? And on the crematorium, they had lifts, and they had little like not like rail, but like it was rail that they would just slide things back and forth. What do you think that part showed you? And then, of course, in the model, it shows you the larger scale of that same thing. So what does that show you about the whole endeavor of it?
It showed me the efficiency that they wanted to conduct this mass murder at. They weren't trying to just kill them and then, like, the next day get rid of the bodies. It was, you walk in, you get undressed, then you get locked in this gas chamber. 30 minutes later, they're dead. And immediately they are basically shoveled onto a lift, thrown in a cart, and burned. Dumped straight into an incinerator and burned. There is no, that is the most efficient way they could have disposed of their atrocities, with the smallest amount of guilt or regret for the workers working in there. They were trying to keep it just flowing, and nobody would feel guilt or regret.
No, I think that you hit that right on. So now that you guys have been there, and obviously, so our journey started in Germany, and we got to go to Berlin and see various sites there. We went to the Jewish Museum of Berlin, which gave us a really good understanding of this stuff on that level. Then we went to Warsaw, and we went to their Jewish museum, which was, again, a fantastic museum, gave us very big insight. And now you've been to the actual, Auschwitz, which is Auschwitz Birkenau, is one of the worst places ever to exist. What do you take away from that? What do you guys think you bring back home from experiencing that type of an event or that type of thing in person? All right, Michael.
I think going back home, you bring back a sense of respect. There are many people who make jokes and don't understand the full story or the idea of what actually happened. Reading in a textbook, looking at pictures, even reading a book like Night by Elie Wiesel will never bring anyone the true idea or give them the ability to envision what Auschwitz Birkenau was. There's nothing that will ever or could ever compare to the atrocities witnessed by and experienced by the Jewish people and any prisoner at Auschwitz. There's nothing that could paint the picture for anyone born before it, that didn't see it. You have to see it yourself to understand it. No podcast, no video, no nothing will ever paint the picture for you.
Just one thing I wanted to just bring up. I remember on the tour, the tour guide talked about a priest. I forgot his name, but
Saint Maximilian.
And the tour guide talked about how he sacrificed his own life for another prisoner there, and he gave up his spot to be executed. And I think these stories like these, I know there's a bunch of others of just something positive in such a terrible situation, shows how even in it can be applied to anything, how even in the worst of situations you can always find a spark of hope, or just a little bit of good. It's just something, if people are going through something rough, you just tell them there's always, so you can it'll get better eventually. And I remember that the person that Maximilian saved, he eventually survived, and he would have died if it wasn't for him. And I thought it was important to bring up.
One thing I think you can take away from doing something like this is, even as small it is you take a portion of that on your shoulders, you take a weight of it. It's such a small portion in comparison to the people who did survive or new people who died in the camp, but it's still, you take away, something is on your shoulders, some weight is there that you may not take any real percentage of it, but you are now you have a bond and connection to it, of seeing it and experiencing it, and it kind of adds something to your life that you take home with you, and you can't forget something like this. It's not something that can go away and a week from now it's not something you can think about. You see it and you're going to remember those, the gas chambers and the buildings, and it's something you're going to have with you forever, even as the small percentage of it you do have.
One more thing I just wanted to add is, after seeing it, you feel the responsibility of someone who has experienced it to never let something like this ever happen again. Whether it's in your lifetime, it's in your great-grandkids' lifetimes. You feel a sense of responsibility to learn from the history, albeit terrible history. But you have to learn from the mistakes made by others and experienced by others. History is the only thing that can teach you about your actions and how there's consequences besides religion. You have to consult God especially after seeing something like this.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. Does anyone have any last things you want to share? I know we covered a lot. It's been a very long day. Again, for those who are listening, they were at Auschwitz less than 12 hours ago, and so this is very fresh, and we wanted to get a recording with our group. And thank you for listening, and thank you guys for sharing. I do appreciate it.